In geopolitics, tensions often escalate, not because something new appears on the map, but because the meaning of what was already there suddenly changes. For years, the United States and Venezuela have been locked in a tense standoff filled with sanctions, accusations, maritime patrols, and competing narratives. But today, that standoff has entered a new strategic category, one shaped not by ideology alone, but by counterterrorism architecture, new legal interpretations, and a rapidly expanding U.S. military presence across the Caribbean. Washington's recent designation of entities linked to the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization has redefined the entire relationship. For the first time, U.S. policy treats Venezuelan state-associated structures not merely as adversaries, but as terrorism-related actors. This single classification opens operational pathways that did not exist until now and raises a deeper question. Has the threshold for direct action, including limited strikes or cross-border operations, quietly dropped lower than at any moment in the past 2 decades? The escalation between the United States and Venezuela is now unfolding across 3 synchronized fronts. Legally, the terrorism designation activates authorities normally associated with foreign operations, lowering political and legal barriers for actions beyond U.S. borders. For Caracas, this shift is interpreted not just as an accusation, but as the construction of a narrative that prepares the ground for intervention. Militarily, U.S. forces have expanded their presence across the Caribbean in ways not seen for years. Carrier groups, amphibious units, destroyers, surveillance aircraft, and radar networks now provide a comprehensive picture of Venezuelan activity, forming what Venezuelan planners increasingly perceive as a staging environment capable of supporting rapid, precise operations if triggered. Meanwhile, on the informational front, Washington frames its activities as counterterrorism and maritime security, while Caracas presents them as pretexts for regime change, aligning its message with partners such as Russia and Iran. Together, these fronts create a crisis that is no longer static, but actively evolving. The roots of this confrontation extend back more than 2 decades. In the Chavez era, Venezuela shifted away from traditional cooperation with Washington and deepened ties with Russia, China, Iran, and Cuba. This generated ideological friction and heightened U.S. concerns about intelligence networks and illicit activities. As Venezuela's economy deteriorated in the 2010s, sanctions expanded, pushing Caracas further into the orbit of non-Western partners. Over time, narco-trafficking allegations involving Venezuelan entities became geopolitical issues, but they remained within law enforcement frameworks until the current shift. The Foreign Terrorist Organization designation marks a dramatic escalation, signaling that Washington now interprets the issue not as corruption or criminality, but as part of a broader national security threat. The standoff is no longer only political. It has become strategically framed as a security priority that justifies actions previously considered off the table. Each actor in this crisis brings distinct motivations. Washington seeks to limit networks it now labels as terrorism-associated, prevent the expansion of Russian or Iranian military influence in the hemisphere, maintain control of key maritime routes, and ensure regional partners contribute to surveillance and intelligence efforts. Above all, it aims to prevent Venezuela from becoming a platform for adversarial powers near U.S. territory. Caracas, meanwhile, prioritizes regime survival, territorial sovereignty, deterrence against intervention, and alliances with extra-regional powers that can offset U.S. pressure. Venezuelan leaders interpret the growing U.S. presence not as a defensive posture, but as preparation for limited or precision strikes. Regional states attempt to balance their reliance on U.S. security assistance with fears of spillover should tensions escalate. Extra-regional powers such as Russia and Iran gain leverage by supporting Caracas, complicating U.S. planning and expanding their own geopolitical reach. Their involvement reinforces Washington's perception that Venezuela is no longer a local issue, but a node in a global contest of influence. This standoff matters because of the strategic environment in which it is unfolding. The Caribbean functions as a narrow funnel for maritime traffic, energy flows, and naval routes, meaning even small incidents can have disproportionate effects. Airspace has become increasingly compressed, with U.S. surveillance flights and Venezuelan defenses operating in close proximity, raising the risk of misinterpretation. The counterterrorism designation empowers Washington with authorities that allow extraterritorial operations, financial targeting, expanded cooperation with partners, and potential kinetic action, making it one of the most consequential policy shifts in decades. A conflict in this region would reverberate through migration patterns, energy markets, maritime trade, and relations with major global powers. The Caribbean is no longer a peripheral theater. It has become a strategic pressure point in the Western Hemisphere. Several futures are possible. One trajectory involves a managed standoff in which tension persists, but neither side crosses the threshold of direct confrontation. Surveillance, sanctions, and diplomacy exist in a fragile equilibrium. Another path envisions limited diplomatic engagement, driven by economic pressure in Venezuela and political cycles in the United States, though such openings remain narrow and unlikely in the near term. A more consequential scenario involves limited U.S. strikes under counterterrorism authority. These operations would not aim to topple the Venezuelan state, but to disrupt networks Washington classifies as terrorism-linked. Precision airborne strikes could target infrastructure, logistics hubs, or individuals associated with illicit networks. Short in duration and geographically contained, they would be designed to degrade capabilities while avoiding escalation. The legal basis would mirror counterterrorism missions conducted elsewhere, rooted in preemption and disruption. Maritime interdictions could also expand. With a stronger naval presence, the United States could intercept vessels suspected of transporting illicit cargo linked to designated networks. Boarding actions, seizures, and temporary exclusion zones would fall within long-standing counter-narcotics practices, now reinforced by counterterrorism authorities. Although these actions could occur outside Venezuelan territorial waters, Caracas would likely view them as encroachment, increasing the risk of retaliation or diplomatic rupture. Other targeted actions might focus on dismantling organizational capacities. These could include cyber operations against financial channels, joint missions with regional partners to detain individuals operating abroad, or covert efforts to disrupt supply chains and disable aircraft. Such actions would be compartmentalized, designed to avoid open confrontation, and framed as limited counterterrorism interventions rather than steps toward regime change. Their purpose would be to intensify pressure while stopping short of direct conflict with the Venezuelan state. Yet the most dangerous scenario arises not from deliberate decision-making, but from miscalculation. A radar lock misinterpreted, a challenged surveillance aircraft, or an unexpected maritime encounter could produce instantaneous escalation in an already compressed environment. The U.S.-Venezuela confrontation has entered a phase defined less by what is visible on the map and more by the legal and strategic frameworks that now govern it. By placing elements linked to Venezuela within a terrorism context, Washington has altered the nature of the conflict, expanding the range of actions it can justify or execute. Caracas, in turn, interprets every deployment as evidence of an impending operation. Standoffs often evolve not through dramatic moves, but through subtle shifts that redefine what each side considers acceptable or inevitable. The question now is not whether tension will rise, but how far and how quickly it might escalate before either side loses control of the space between narrative and action. Thank you for watching this documentary on the Atlas Report. If you found this analysis useful, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Your support helps us continue exploring global power, strategic geography, and the forces shaping world events. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next report.